All right, welcome everybody. This is going to be a fire behavior presentation we're doing for District 68 and D Shift. This is going to be one of several presentations we're going to do. We're going to have it set up on YouTube so anybody can watch it at any time. And then these are going to kind of build on top of each other. So this is kind of the very basic part of it. That's going to be the basis of a lot of our tactics that we discuss in the future. You're going to hear me reference this over and over and over. So if you go through it, doesn't really hit, watch it again. If you need a refresher, this link's still going to be good. So we're going to go ahead and jump into it. So before we can get into talking about nozzle tactics or ventilation tactics or search techniques, it's important that we understand the very basic of what we're encountered on the fire ground. So with that, again, we always like to start looking at a holistic approach and understand the why of what we do. The what, the how, right? We talk about that. We argue about that. We differing opinions, whatever it is. We know that we pull lines this way, we flow water that way. We cut holes like this or like that, right? That's the how and the what. But we really need to have the big understanding, that strategic perspective of why, right? And in this case, it's going to be our fire. Why is our fire doing what it is? And then how do we attack it, understanding the why of the fire to get the best possible outcome. So this is a quote from The Art of War. It says, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. And I think this is important that, again, in the perspective of a firefighter, our enemy obviously is going to be the fire. So if we have that in-depth understanding of it, we know the why of it, every which way it turns into all the fine details, then the outcome is going to be no big deal, right? We're going to have the tactics ready to go, and we know what to expect every time because, again, it is predictable. It is through the study of thermodynamics and the physics of it, we understand that it behaves a certain way. So we're going to expose some things that you may not have been taught before that hasn't made its way over from the world of physics and thermodynamics. Now, when we talk about that, we always think of like this little meme here where a little jokingly says the definition of physics is a branch of science chiefly concerned with using exceptionally long and complicated formulas to describe how a ball rolls. And that's probably how a lot of us feel, right? We hear all this stuff, we hear people throwing science and research, and you're like, it's fire, put wet stuff and red stuff. It's pretty simple. And to some extent it is, but it is important that we understand and can articulate why we do what we do and why we accomplish that. Because if not, then we have people that can come in and start trying to change things, alter tactics when, our anecdotal evidence tells us it's good. Can we explain why that it's good, right? Can we say that this tactic works because the fire is behaving this manner? We apply this and then it alters the behavior by doing said action. So it's what we're going to kind of get into. So first off, we start understanding something's burning. This is very essence of a solid burning. This is a matchstick, and so we can see the wood there where it's charred. And it's important to understand that the solid itself is not burning. It's actually the pyrolysis process, the heating of the material, the wood in this case, and it puts off a gas. We talk about things that are off gassing in fires. This is no different, right? We've heated something up, it's going through pyrolysis, it's charring, it gives off a gas, and then that gas starts to ignite, right? As we can see the process here, and then that's what leads to combustion. So we say this, right? Do I have an understanding? Know that solids themselves are not actually burning in a structure fire. It's actually solids that are heated up that and go through the pyrolysis process, and then it's a gas coming off. And you say, what's the big deal? Fire's fire. Well, the big deal is understanding, that it's a gas fire that we're dealing with. And we're going to talk about how that affects it here in a second. Now, the next thing we'd like to throw out there, and you don't have to remember this, but it's good to kind of know where it comes from. But it's called Charles' Law. And Charles' Law just states that the volume of an ideal gas is directly proportional to the absolute temperature at a constant pressure, right? Easy enough. Basically, as the temperature of a gas molecule goes up, the size of the molecule is going to go up. As the temperature goes down, the size of the molecule is going to go down, right? So again, as that molecule increases, the amount of pressure in the room is going to increase. So again, we're going to relate that to our fire attack as we have, the temperature of a fire going up and up and up, the volume of air is going to continue to expand. Conversely, if we start flowing water on it, then we drop that temperature, we're going to have retraction of gases as well. That's kind of this Charles' Law principle here. Now, when it comes to we talk about gas and pressures, I think we can all agree, we understand that when there's an area of low pressure, in nature, it wants to diffuse out and even out to the areas of low pressure to the point that they're even, right? So if I got one room that is super high pressure, the other room's low, I open a door, those two rooms should in theory equalize out. So that's important concept for us to understand and keep in mind. Now, this guy here, right? Probably don't know him, right? Looks like he should be a fireman, that stash. This guy here is actually has did a lot of research that it will significantly impacted the fire service. We don't even know it. And we're going to go over some of his work here. And unfortunately, you don't see it in the ISTA books and some of the other stuff we see in the Basic Fire Academy. But he's done a lot of work. And this guy is Henry Le Chatelier. He's a thermodynamist from France. Did a lot of work in the late 1800s on combustion gases and how they work. Now, he's gonna come in here in a second. First, let's look at this. All right, the first three elements you see up top, that's our oxygen, heat, fuel. So that's essentially our fire triangle. So when we put together that fourth element, the little green triangle, and make a tetrahedron, that's what we know as the fire tetrahedron. Now, what we find is that that fourth element, the self-sustaining chemical chain reaction, is not really elaborated on in most of our textbooks. And you're like, yeah, whatever. It has to have a chemical reaction, no big deal. What does it matter? And I've always asked the question myself until we started kind of diving deeper in some research and finally found what that element, in my opinion, truly represents and ties into thermodynamic principles that are widely accepted, but just never really been articulated in the fire service. So, as we saw the gentleman with the great mustache, Le Chatelier, he came up with a principle of equilibrium. And what it said is that a system at equilibrium will respond to stress so as to reduce stress in the system. It's also known as pressure equilibrium principle. Basically, what does it mean? Well, think of our seesaw you see here on the screen. Our seesaw, on the right side, we have our product, right? That's the fire. On the left side is the reactant. It's kind of our ingredients. So our reactants or ingredients are going to be the fuel, heat, and oxygen. And what Le Chatelier said is that this balance that goes back and forth is influenced by the concentration of the reactants, right? So as I have more fuel and more oxygen, right, the fire is going to increase in production to burn off that to where it has that happy medium. But he also said that it's influenced by temperature and pressure. So what he found is that when the temperature increased, the amount of fire burning in a container actually decreased, right, with a higher temperature. That there's a happy medium where fire likes to auto-regulate itself too. Same concept, right? Pressure, right? There's a certain where high pressure actually will negatively affect the amount of fire physically burning. So pressure goes up, fire is actually going to decrease. Pressure goes down, fire increases. Right. So that's really important. So with that, we got this seesaw, right? Again, we got fires on the left side. It's influenced by the ingredients, right? Our fuel and our oxygen, as well as the temperature and the pressure on it. So break this down. We got this little table here. And you can kind of reference back to this. But we look at we see a little mouse here. So our reactants here, when our fuel and oxygen goes up, the amount of fire increases in size. Same thing when our reactants and my fuel and oxygen goes down, our fire decreases in size. When our pressure goes up, right, fire decreases. Our pressure goes down, fire increases. Temperature goes up, fire decreases. Temperature goes down, fire increases. So with that said, all right, that's a nice table, but how do we know? Well, it was interesting. After Le Chatelier came up with this information in the study, about 9 months after, there was another famous thermodynamist that came out and said, "I got this theory," and they're like, "Yeah, Le Chatelier already came up with it." A lot of his stuff actually did. They were able to test and essentially retest Le Chatelier's work and test his theory, and his theory held up to the research that this other gentleman did. He was just a little too late on coming out with it. So we have that, but we also done recent research when it comes to firefighting through Underwriters Laboratories and the Fire Safety Research Institute. So up in Illinois, they have this big giant warehouse and a gigantic vent hood, basically, where they build structures. They basically built two houses, about 1,800 square foot roughly, and then set them on fire in various configurations. What we're going to look at, you can see the picture here. This is one of the houses. They built essentially the box. They just didn't put the roof on it, but they would burn this room you see on the corner, or they would burn this room plus one that's on that Bravo side that you can't see. And so we're going to look at a fire they lit off in, there's no interventions taking place. And these squiggly lines will represent that. So all these squiggly different colored lines are essentially a pole they had in the room. And from 1 foot to 7 foot had temperature sensors on them. As we can see right here where they light the fire off, fire's burning. This is time in seconds, right? So 2 minutes go by, it really starts taking off. By 3 minutes, we're getting up to flashover. So the room gets all the way up to like 1900 degrees. There's no interventions going on whatsoever until we get to here, right? This is when they start flowing water. This is just the fire, sitting with itself and its feelings in this room doing its thing. So the fire gets really hot, then it dips down right here. It goes back up, dips down, goes back up, dips down. This right here is that happy medium, about roughly 1600 degrees for this fire, where it's auto-regulating out. This kind of represents what Le Chatelier was talking about. He said when temperature goes up, fire is going to decrease. So we see increase in temperature, and then it comes back down, and that's that fire decreasing. We've had several members that were trapped in flashovers, and they'll, recount their experiences and talk about how it flashed, it got really hot, pushed them to the floor, it felt super hot, but then they felt this lift. I would argue to say that what we're seeing here is that equilibrium principle in action here. Temperature got super hot, it flashed in the room on the guys. That relief they felt was the physical fire decreasing, right, as it compensates to find that happy medium that we see right here. So the fire continues to do a thing, and the temperature starts to come down a little bit, and then open the door, see a little increase, flow water, and immediately get to here. So this is a good kind of confirms our theory, but say, well, how do we know if the temperature went up and didn't come down just because it ran out of oxygen, right? So first off, let's look at pressure, right? We see the same correlation in pressure, right? We got a pressure sensor at 4 foot and 7 foot. You notice at 1 foot, it's negative. So think about the average house fire you pull up to, you open the door, smoke's rolling out the top half, and you got inlet gas coming from the bottom with that bidirectional flow. See that neutral plane there? This is, again, so that 1 foot, that's that inlet gas to that bidirectional flow. We got the exhaust gas at 4 foot and 7 foot, but we see that increase in pressure. As soon as that pressure gets super high relative to this experiment, we see that drop, right? As it comes back up and it continues to do that roller coaster, but essentially it's evening out right here. So again, kind of confirms that fire doesn't like high pressure. There's obviously a direct relation to the pressure and the temperature. But as that pressure goes up, that fire is going to decrease in what's burning till we get to that auto regulation point. So our oxygen argument, this is where we look at, this is right outside the door where the fire was. We measure at 1 foot and 3 foot for oxygen, CO, and CO2. So right here, what we see, this is our oxygen at 3 foot, and this is our oxygen at 1 foot. 3 foot, we just saw at 4 foot, we had pressure exhausting out of the room. And so you could say that this decrease right here is what the exhaust gases. The inlet gases was right here at 1 foot. We see that the whole time we flashed over, and even that immediate period after, where we're still at 16, 17 degrees, we're still above 20% oxygen. Plenty of oxygen to sustain combustion. Here, we're only about 18% if you really were to zoom in on it. So then we look at right around the corner, and this is the oxygen at 1 foot around the corner feeding this inlet. And then again, never drops below 20%. So that tells us there's plenty of oxygen that's supplying this fire. That decrease in temperature had nothing to do with fuel or oxygen. It was a reaction to the temperature and the pressure that's in the room. So with that information, all right, what does that mean for us? Well, what that means is when we start attacking fires, we know that fire reacts to pressure. So when we're flowing a hose line going down a hallway, you're entraining air. If you're creating a high pressure environment, soaking the walls and the carpet, right? Just the act of water mapping, we call it, soaking the walls and the carpet, that fire has to burn all that water off, and it has to boil off before that room's going to flash. And so we're protecting ourselves by flowing, but when we're flowing, we're entraining air, we're creating a high pressure area, meaning that fire does not want to come towards you on that nozzle if we can maintain that flow and move state. So that high pressure can be our friend. Conversely, on the truck, if we're doing ventilation, whether it's horizontal, but especially vertical ventilation, we're opening up and trying to create the largest low pressure opening. So all that smoke, heat, and fire is going to be drawn there and stop the lateral spread. So as we know in Southwest Houston, with all of our apartment fires, we have the greatest success when the first line starts attacking a fire, lines getting had to cut it off, but more importantly, also matching all that with a vertical ventilation opening, right? We stop that fire from spreading. Because again, we're providing the biggest low pressure opening, and to keep that fire from moving. So with these pressure principles, we use low pressure to guide the fire where we want it to go, and we use high pressure to bully it away from areas we don't want it to go. So that's the same concept. If we pressurize a exposure, right, or an attic space in a large building with a PPV fan. It was District 6 used it on the St. Mark's fire in the Heights a couple years back, kept the sanctuary from burning with 6 positive pressure fans using that same concept. This is the science, the equilibrium principle is the science that backs that up and why that's so effective. So again, what we take from here and we're going to build in the future is going over a flow and move attack, right? Trying to not shut that nozzle down, right? Keep moving it, whether you're using a power cone or an oval motion on your smooth bore, but that high pressure is going to protect you and keep it from coming back on you. And then from the truck side, we're going to use that to manipulate it. So our next installment, we'll start diving deeper into some tactics on that. But check this out, share away, and if you got any questions, feel free to holler at me. Thanks.